Hello and welcome to StudyIQ. I am your friend Rahul Saigaonker. Let's continue our discussion of NCERT Science series. You already know we have reached science textbook for class 9 and we are dealing right now with chapter 7. Now before this, we discussed some aspects of chemistry. We discussed about matter. We said matter is made up of tiny particles called atoms. We also discussed characteristics of atoms. We discussed different models which define atomic structure. Then we jumped into domain of biology. In one of the chapters, we discussed cell, the fundamental unit of life. Then tissues. We discussed tissues in two parts, plant tissues in part 1, animal tissues in part 2. And right now, we are in chapter 7. This is going to be part 2 of chapter 7. We are discussing how do we classify living organisms. We established certain facts in our part 1. We said that there is a lot of biodiversity on Mother Earth. That is why we call it biosphere. We find different organisms. Among the different organisms, there are different characteristics. And we said biodiversity is quite extensive, especially in between the tropics, between Tropic of Cancer and Tropic of Capricorn, because of moist and humid climate. Right? We established this. Then we said, how do we classify these? How do we classify these? Right? It is quite bewildering that there is a lot of variety of life on Earth. So to categorize it, different people have used different methods. I discussed about Aristotle's method, things on land, things in water, things in air, etc. But ultimately, we said that human life has been divided into these classifications, right? Mostly Ernest Haeckel and Whittaker's classification, where living organisms have been divided on the domain of prokaryotic and eukaryotic cell. Domain prokarya, we have the kingdom Monera. It has been divided into 5 major kingdoms. Kingdom Monera, kingdom Protista, which is unicellular, but they come under eukaryotic cells. Then you have kingdom Fungi, which do not perform photosynthesis. Then you have kingdom Plantae and kingdom Animalia. 5 major kingdoms. And we also discussed that through the taxonomic developments, different biologists, different scientists have added subcategories or subgroups also. We discussed the taxonomic subgroups, especially for Homo sapiens. All right. Today, we are going to specifically talk about kingdom Plantae. In our previous discussion, we discussed about Monera, right? These are prokaryotes. We discussed about Protista. These are eukaryotes. Examples are amoeba, Paramecium, other protozoans. Then we discussed fungi also, right? Fungi also. Today, specifically about kingdom Plantae. Now, what are the characteristics of kingdom Plantae and how do we characterize this kingdom Plantae? Kingdom Plantae, the name itself says these are basically the green plants which are able to undergo photosynthesis because they have chlorophyll in them. Now, when we look at the categorization, how have we categorized kingdom Plantae into different subgroups and subcategories? We have seen that we look at the plant and we see if that plant has differentiated and distinct parts, then we classify them in subgroups. We see if they have specific vascular tissues, do they have xylem and phloem? We categorize on that as well. Then we categorize, do plants bear seeds or not? What kind of fertilization takes place there? So on different characteristics, we have subdivided kingdom Plantae. But in general, there are certain general characteristics of kingdom Plantae, which you already know. We have discussed this in class 6, 7 also. If it is a plant is composed of eukaryotic cell. It is not prokaryotic cell. We know plants are generally multicellular because unicellular organisms, we have discussed this, Monera, Protista, etc. Plants are multicellular. Plants are stationary. They are non-motile. That means they stay at one place. Now you must be thinking, sir, what about these aquatic plants which move with water? Technically, they do not move. They move because of the movement of water. Remember, they are non-motile. But remember, they are eukaryotic cells which have cell walls. Very important point. They also have, majority of them, they do have transport system, that is vascular tissues, xylem and phloem, and other complex, permanent and simple tissues also. They are autotrophic. Why? Because they contain chlorophyll. They can undergo photosynthesis. They produce their own food. Their method of reproduction can be different. It can be asexual or it can be sexual reproduction as well. And please remember, many of the species of plants, I would say barring angiosperms, many plant species, they do go alternation of generation. Now, what is the meaning of this alternation of generation? It depends on what kind of reproduction the plant follows. Alternation means many a times plant, if it is reproducing asexually, that means it will have a haploid genes or it will have haploid cells. But alternation of generation means if plants are able to alternate between sexual reproduction and asexual reproduction, then at one point of time they will have haploid cells, and then at the other point they have diploid cells, and we will see some sort of circulation between these things. That is called as alternation of generation. In many plant species we find alternation of generation. So these are some basic characteristics of kingdom Plantae. Now, how do we further subcategorize this kingdom Plantae? Kingdom Plantae is further subcategorized as Thallophytes. How? Thallophytes are basically those which do not have differentiated parts. We'll talk about that in detail. We'll categorize them in another 5 subgroups. Thallophyta, then we have Bryophyta, right? Or Bryophytes. These have differentiated parts, but they do not have any vascular tissue. That means they do not have complex tissues like xylem and phloem. So we have Thallophyta, we have Bryophyta, meaning no differentiated parts. Differentiated parts, among that no xylem phloem, one group. And those who have xylem phloem, those who have vascular tissues, among that the ones which do not produce any seeds, they are called as Pteridophytes. Now these Pteridophytes are the ones which undergo this alternation of generation a lot. Apart from that, we have the ones which produce seeds. These are called Phanerogams, and under Phanerogams we have Gymnosperms, which bear naked seeds, and then Angiosperms, which bear fruits. That means seeds are enclosed. Seeds are enclosed. Basically, seeds are enclosed within the ovary. And then Angiosperms are further divided into dicots and monocots. We'll talk about them one by one. This is the basic categorization. I hope that you do remember. Please revise this and remember this. Especially, I would say Bryophyta, Pteridophyta, Gymnosperms, Angiosperms. We will be talking about them in our subsequent discussions as well. That's the basic categorization. Let's jump into the first classification, subclassification under the kingdom Plantae, that is Thallophyta. Now, Thallophyta, first characteristic is they do not have any differentiated body parts. Now, when I say a plant, what does a plant have? First, I'm drawing a simple herb. You will see that it has roots. This is the ground level. It has roots. It has a tender stem, correct? This is stem. These are basic roots. Then, if I simply draw some sort of green leaves, then you will see branches and leaves. And these leaves will have chlorophyll. In herbs, even stem will have chlorophyll. They will also undergo photosynthesis. These are basic characteristics. And on this, you can also find leaves, fruit, etc. This is the basic understanding of a plant. But remember, Thallophyta, it is not going to have any of these. No roots, no stem. In fact, no specialized leaves as well. So basically, these are like microorganisms which are capable of undergoing photosynthesis. There are many examples of this. You will find many green algae which are put into this particular family of Thallophyta. As I told you, algae were basically before in Protista group, Protista kingdom. Now they are in Plantae, especially photosynthetic algae. There are many examples. Phaerogyra is one of the examples which has chloroplast. Yes, there is Cladophora, Eulothrix, Ulva, right? There are so many examples which you can see. These are the pictures. Colonial algae, they come under Thallophyta. The common stonewort, they come under Thallophyta. Spirogyra comes under Thallophyta. Why? Because they do not have root, they do not have stem, they do not have leaves. That means their job is not differentiated. The organs are not formed at all. These parts are not there. So what are the characteristics of these Thallophytes? They do not have any vascular tissue. They do not have any root system, extensive root system or stem system. But they do need water. That means they are mostly present in moist and wet location. Of course, they are green. That means they have chlorophyll. They are autotrophic. They can produce their own food. What kind of food they produce? They use carbon dioxide. They use sunlight. They need water. Then they produce basic glucose. And excess glucose that is produced by these Thallophyta, they are stored in form of starch. All right. Again, Thallophytes can show sexual reproduction as well as asexual reproduction. Whenever there is sexual reproduction, the sexual cells are very simple and single celled, and there is no concept of development of embryo here. Clear? These are thallophytes. These are some of the examples. So from now on, whenever you see any water body where there are some sort of green algae, then those are thallophytes. So that's why I always suggest or advise students that whenever you're walking somewhere, you're watching something, right, in your free time, just look at things and try to understand what are those. So thallophytes are these organisms. Next is Bryophyta, right? Now Bryophyta are also called as amphibians of plant kingdom. Why? Because we can find them in water, we can find them in moist condition, we can find them even in dry condition. Again, you will see that they have some structures. If you look at this particular picture, you will see yes, there might be some kind of stem, there might be leaves, but no other vascular tissues, meaning they do not have any kind of vascular tissues. There is no xylem, there is no phloem, there is no development of these complex tissues. Please remember this: no xylem, no phloem. There can be many examples of this. Liverworts, you must have seen mosses, right? Mosses, especially in your wet conditions, you must have seen whenever there is extensive rain, you see some green kind of structure, something, a growth, something like this. These are very common. Liverworts are also very common because they have simple leaf-like, stem-like structures, and many of these bryophytes, they might not have roots. I'm not telling that bryophytes roots are completely absent, but in majority of bryophytes you would not find extensive root system. They have simple leaf-like, stem-like structures. They do not have any xylem, phloem. Yes, they are green, that means they contain chlorophyll, they undergo photosynthesis. But for support of stem, for development of leaves, very primitive kind of leaves, they have something called as rhizoids. Now these rhizoids, they help in absorption of minerals, they help in absorption of water. They do not have xylem and phloem. Yes, they do show sexual reproduction, and this sexual reproduction, it depends on availability of water. Very, very important pointer. This reproduction depends on availability of water. Many times we see these bryophytes growing whenever there is rain. You must have seen when you go to your terrace, or when you see a side wall, you must have seen some kind of green growth or some kind of plants which develop, which have basic leaves and basic stem. Those are all examples of these bryophytes. So for next time, do watch them. All right. Right. So we discussed about thallophytes and bryophytes. Next is Pteridophyta. Now pteridophytes have differentiated organs. That means pteridophytes have roots, pteridophytes have stem, pteridophytes have your vascular system also. They have vascular system, meaning they also have xylem and phloem. But what is missing in them? Just look at these plants. What is missing in them? They do not have any flowers. They do not have any flowers. They do not develop any seeds. And next time when you just go to a garden, or if you have a garden, if you have any sort of ornamental plants, observe those ornamental plants. Most of them would be pteridophytes. Most of them would be pteridophytes, because if it is not producing any sort of flowers, then they are pteridophytes. And please remember, when I characterize this, I gave a term called as phenogram. Here you see the ones which produce seeds, they are called as phenograms. But all the three, Thallophyta, Bryophyta and Pteridophyta, these three are called as cryptograms. Cryptograms. Why? Because their sexual organs or sexual reproduction is actually hidden. That's why they are called as cryptograms. And the opposite of that, seed producing plants are called as phenograms. Cryptograms and phenograms. Another classification has been done. But when you look at pteridophytes, you will see that they have differentiated roots, they have differentiated stem, they have differentiated leaves, they also have special tissues for conduction of water and food. That is, xylem and phloem is present. There are many examples. You can look at many of these plants where you do not see flowers. They would be most probably pteridophytes. There are certain characteristics of that. They will have all the things, but they will have no flowers. Of course, no flowers means no seeds. Their leaves are also known as pinna. They do have vascular system, xylem and phloem. They also show alternation of generation. In fact, pteridophytes, which are the plants which we can see, they show alternation of generation. Many a times the plant will have haploid cells, the plant will also have diploid cells, depending on the sexual reproduction. They show sexual as well as asexual reproduction. They also show sexual reproduction, would be right. All right. So there are many examples of this. Next time when you watch in a garden or something, do make a note of that. Pteridophytes. Then the next set of classification is rather easy. We are talking about phanerogams. Under phanerogams, we have two. One which produces naked seeds. These are called gymnosperms. In fact, you must have seen a lot of gymnosperms in and around you, especially if you're staying in high altitude places. You will see pine trees, you will see cycas, right? You must have seen pines. Now what are these pines? These are actually seeds itself. They are naked seeds. These do not produce any flower. They do not have any flowers, right? So flowering is not seen extensively. And when you look at these plants, gymnosperms, they will have male, for example, pine tree, male pine cone and female pine cone. These are basically naked seeds, gymnosperms. Gymnosperm basically means, gymno means naked, sperm means seed, right? Examples of pine, deodar, etc. You will find many. We'll be talking about them again in our subsequent discussion in 10th and 11th also. And the counterpart of gymnosperms is angiosperms, one which produces flowers. These are quite extensively seen. They undergo sexual reproduction. Angiosperms, meaning the seeds which are covered. The seeds which are covered. That is why, take any kind of crop, take any kind of fruit. Say there is mango, right? Mango season is about to get over. You have mango, the fleshy part, and inside there is a seed, right? Talk about any kind of food grains, right? Talk about wheat, talk about rice, talk about any chickpea, Bengal gram, etc. Any kind of gram. Those are all angiosperms. Why? Because first the flower will come and then the fruit is going to be formed. And fruit, in that fruit is basically mature ovary. Inside that you have seeds. The seed is covered with some sort of a fleshy part or some sort of protective layer. Those are called angiosperms. Majority of the plants that you observe in your day-to-day life are angiosperms. And angiosperms are further divided into two categories. One is monocot and another one is dicot, right? Monocot stands for monocotyledons and dicot is dicotyledons, meaning the seed that is produced, it cannot be broken. Seed cannot be broken further. Monocot seed, it cannot be broken further. But when you break a dicot seed, it can be broken into two pieces. You must be having a lot of pulses, right? Every day you have dal, right? Dal makhni, dal Punjabi, dal tadka, etc. What is a dal? That dal is a dicotyledon seed. That is a dicot seed. That means first it comes as a whole, but you break it into two for your consumption. But there are many monocot seeds. Monocot seeds are like, say, wheat. Wheat is monocot. Rice is monocot, which cannot be broken into. Corn is again a monocot seed. So we find angiosperms, flowering plants, which lead to development of fruits. The seeds are protected by some sort of a layer. It can be monocot or dicot, right? Monocot seeds, they look something like this. Dicot, there will be a layer which you can break into two. And whenever you see a monocot seed plant, its roots are always fibrous, whereas a dicot, it has a taproot system. Similarly, leaves. For a monocot plant, the leaves have parallel venation. The leaves have parallel veins. Whereas in your dicot plants, the leaves have reticulate venation. They have net-like veins. Apart from that, when you take a cross section, the vascular bundles in dicot plants are in form of a ring, whereas the vascular bundles in a monocot plant, they are rather scattered. Apart from that, when you look at the flower of monocot and dicot, for a monocot plant, they always come in pairs of 3. That means there can be 3 petals, there can be 6 petals, there can be 9 petals, right? 3, 6, etc. But when you look at a dicot flower, it will have 4 or 5 parts, or 4 or 5 petals, or in the multiples of 4 and 5 petals, right? So these are basic differences. Now, to sum up our discussion of kingdom Plantae, let me give you certain examples. As I told you, whenever a plant is developing, there is bryophyte. Bryophytes do not have any vascular system. They do not have any vascular system. They are land plants. Examples are mosses. Then you have pteridophytes. Pteridophytes are again land-based. You will see they are seedless. They have vascular system. They have xylem and phloem. Example is fern. Then there are phanerogams, that is gymnosperm and angiosperm. Gymnosperms are naked seeds. Angiosperms are which when give you flower and fruits. There are many examples you can see here. Plants that do not make any kind of seeds. If it has no true roots, stems or leaves, it becomes algae, that is Thallophyta. But if it has some roots, stem and leaves, it becomes your Bryophyta, that is mosses. And if it has roots, stems and leaves but do not produce any seeds, then it becomes your Pteridophyta. And if a plant produces seeds, then they are gymnosperms, naked seeds. They are angiosperms, seeds that have covering on it. Basically, they produce fruit, right? Inside the ovary, inside the mature ovary, we find the seeds. This is the categorization of kingdom Plantae. All right. So that's the end of our part 2 discussion. In the subsequent discussion, we'll talk about kingdom Animalia. But before I go, there is a small notice for all of you. Please remember that our prelims to interview initiative is starting from 19th of June. Mark this particular date. Mark this date. And to enroll for this, just visit our website studyiq.com. This is the most comprehensive program where we will be hand-holding you in your prelims, mains, and interview stage. The entire coaching would be in English. If you want maximum discount, do use my code Rahul Live. And if you want to follow me, you can follow me on this particular ID at the rate Rahul Sai 222. Thank you for watching this again. Jai Hind.